Thank you all for letting me know where you are, but also like where you're coming from. Also, still working on my Fahrenheit to Celsius conversions, so bear with me. This month is the April Analytics Tableau user group. Thank you all for coming out. Really quickly, I know most of you are returning, so you're aware of how this works. But just for anyone that is new, this is a completely global tug, so we will stay virtual even after lockdown because we have people coming in, as you guys can see, from all over the world. And I appreciate you for being here. Our charge, the way that this analytics tug work is that we're really focused on analytics. We say all analytics all the time. So the talks you'll have today and the talks that we have in all of our sessions will be primarily focused on analytics and how it works and how you use Tableau and all of our Tableau tools, desktop, web edit, Axe Data, how you use them to analyze information and get real results. So we've got a couple of really awesome sessions today. And I'll leave this up for half a second if you would like to use your QR readers or your cameras on your phone to look into some of the things that we have. We have our forum where you can just search analytics user group. We've also got our user group page, which is just usergroups.tableau/analytics. And we're also on Twitter, so you can find us at Analytics Tug. So lots of ways to find us and hang out, even when we're not doing an event. So the tug is led by myself. I'm Sedale, and Annabelle. I will let her introduce herself in just a second. For me, I'm a Tableau desktop specialist, also a former featured author. And of course, I lead this tug. In addition to that, I work with our community equity task force. So if anyone's interested in diversity within data and the data community, that's something else I'm really passionate about. I got into Tableau primarily to tell better data stories. My data sets are all digital media data, communication, social media, website data, all of that good stuff. And so I use Tableau mostly to create better stories with that information. When I'm not talking about Tableau or hanging out with you guys, I'm most likely going to be talking about wine or sports. If you look on the bottom right, that is a Bordeaux blend. I'm actually going through a couple of bottles of white and red Burgundy. So I've really been on a French wine tip over the past month or so. And then obviously a big fan of UVA sports. I graduated from the University of Virginia not too long ago. Annabelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on your time zone. So my name is Annabelle Rincon, and I am leading a Tableau Center of Enablement at Fontobel, which is a Swiss bank in Switzerland. So my passions in life are obviously Tableau, my dog, and chocolate. And I'm also co-leading Data Plus Women in Zurich. I am a certified professional in Tableau Desktop. I have the chance also to be a Tableau ambassador this year.
Cool. So a couple of quick ground rules. Please continue to use the chat to, continue to chat with us. Let us know where you're from, weather, things like that. If there's anything interesting about the talks, that's a great place to let people know. However, if you have a question and you would like us to see that question, please put it in the Q&A. If you hover toward the bottom, you'll see a section next to the chat that says Q&A. That's where all of the questions should go. The chat moves pretty quickly, so we may or may not be able to see your question if you put it in the chat box. Also, this session is being recorded. The session will be recorded. It'll be on our YouTube channel. So if you have questions, if you're wondering if the session is being recorded, it is being recorded. It'll be on the Tableau YouTube channel. And we'll also send it to you by email as long as you registered. Also, we'll also, if Jim and Tim are fine with it, we're happy to share any slides that they go over during this session. So you will have all of that in your email. Feel free to reach out to me if you don't see it, but it will be there. Okay, so I have done kind of our welcome and letting you guys know how this is all going. So we've got two awesome today. The first is from Tim, who's talking about Tableau functions he can't live without, which means Tableau functions we can't live without either. And then Jem will be talking about putting your operations in order, which is always a really, really important topic, at least in my opinion. We will also, if those of you that were here last time, remember our logo contest, we will be talking about that towards the end. So stick around for that. All right, that is plenty of me talking. So we're going to head over to Tim now. Tim is a Tableau Zen, an ambassador, and also a BI consultant with InfoLab. He actually started with Tableau in version 7 back before 2019 when they changed it to the years first. He's consulted and trained a range of clients in Tableau and is also working with the information lab in the UK. Lots of legendary Tableau users have come through the information lab and are teachers there. So I'm excited about that. Tim is also an F1 fan who fancies himself a creator, gamer, podcaster, and drone hobbyist. So expecting a lot of creativity today. And with that, I'll let Tim take it over. And you're on mute.
I'll start perfectly by muting myself. Maybe scratch creator from that list. I failed at the first hurdle. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. I thought today what I'd do is, let me share my screen while I'm talking here. What I do today is I'd basically start by talking about some of the functions that I basically can't live without. Now, to give some context, functions are sort of a really, I guess, hidden part of Tableau because we kind of use them sometimes without even realizing. And other times we sometimes use the assisted capabilities that Tableau gives us to automatically create them. And so what I wanted to do is just zone in on some functions that I use nearly all the time without even thinking. The way I've sort of found out what these were was I took a couple of workbooks, I scraped the XML, and I just found like which are the functions that keep coming up again and again. And then because these are my favorite functions, I also thought about touching on the functions that I don't use enough, that I should use more to do things that I feel like are really useful for everyone. And so what I've been doing slowly over the last few months is on my YouTube channel, I've been covering some of the core functions, just trying to kind of give a bit of sort of light to the functions because they live in this sort of really dark place here on the very right hand side of the calculation window. In fact, as a Tableau trainer, you'd be amazed how many people have never clicked this little triangle here on the right hand side to open up this little panel. So that's always a little fun sort of thing at the beginning of any training session when people are learning Tableau for the first time. And I basically try and highlight that Tableau has a whole host of functions that do a lot of different things, and fundamentally, each function is there to try and help you do something that is typically done inside of a database or is going to help your analytical questions be more precise and more accurate or more niche, and depending on where you want to take your analysis. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mostly live inside of this workbook. You'll see that I don't have a pre-built workbook. We're going to try and build everything as we go along so that you can kind of see everything as I do it. So I will make mistakes. I apologize for that. And that's just how it goes. On my YouTube channel, everything's perfect because I have the power of editing. Here I don't. So you get to see what it's really like. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to go away from Tableau. I'm going to go to this little poll. So if you've got a phone, you can just point this to the screen. And when you go to that URL, you'll see that there's a question waiting for you. So just point your phone at that, click the link, and it'll take you to a poll. And essentially, I'd just love you to basically very quickly just take a go at the poll. And once you start to do that, I'll start to see the results on screen. So please start doing that. And then once I've got a few results, you should see the results as soon as you've done it. And we'll try and see where it comes. So I'll bring this on screen in case you've done the poll, you can't see it, or you're not taking part in the poll. So this is kind of interesting. I've had 250 people, and this is great. So how many different functions can you use to sort data? There is no right answer here for the record. People are answering this. So those of you who've answered not sure, probably the most correct here. We'll come to that in a second. But interesting to see that some people do have an idea of this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And as people are still answering, I'll give you maybe another minute or so, and we'll just let this sort of play out a little bit. There's a nice distribution here between 3 and 4. It's like it's a perfect sort of skew, but then there's a lot of people at 6. So I'm kind of curious why that is. It's a very precise number as well. 6 and 5 and 4 are very precise. So I always wonder, 3 and 2, maybe, knowledge of Tableau is just getting there. So those are the ones but 5 and 6, I'm even struggling to think what 6 is. When I went to answer this question, I came up with the answer of 5. So I'm actually going to show you 5 functions that I use today. And when I thought about this a little bit more, I actually realized that anything that basically sorts your data or helps you sort your data can be used to sort your data. So really, any calculation you write can be used to sort your data. But there are 5 functions that specifically do this in a very specific way. So let's I'll let that poll run in case you're coming to it late, and we'll see what it settles at, and then we'll come back to that a little later. So to do this, I'm going to just start by building a very, very simple visualization. I'm probably going to put this on columns just to make it a little bit more interesting to see. Okay. And one of the things I like to do if I'm just doing very, very basic sorting is I just like to use the functions up here. If you're wondering where I am, I'm just up here in this little sort of calculation window. Let me change that to red so you can see it more clearly. I'm just up here. And so what I'll do, I'll just start by using the first one. And the first one is an index function, okay? And this, I'm sure if you've used Tableau for a while, the index function is something that hopefully you know about. All it does is it counts the rows in your data. And it has a strange behavior when you use it for the first time because it creates a measure, which is never what you want. Normally, if you're using the index function, what you actually want is just a discrete item here. So I'll just go here to change that to discrete. And essentially, that will give us this nice numbering here. So that's the first function. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, up to 17. Now, this one starts at the number 1. So this index function counts like a human being. Humans start from 1, but there are other functions that start from 0. I'll show you that in a little bit. The next one that I think most people know about is the rank. So let's just go ahead and create that. A little tip, if you want to create a calculation very, very quickly, you can just, bring something in from the shelf. So I'm holding Command on a Mac, it's Control on the Windows. If I drop it in, it will bring the function in. And then you can just highlight that and you go find your function on the right here, and then just click rank, and then double click that, and it will automatically wrap whatever you highlighted with that function. So it saves you having to type things, also means you're wrapping the right things around various things. Okay, so I'll just call this a rank, and here we're just going to rank cells. I'm going to hit apply. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this rank. It was created over here on the bottom left where I'm sort of shaking my mouse. And again, I'm going to drop it right next to the rows, and we're going to make this discrete again. And then I'll close this. And so you can see here, all this is doing is actually just going to my cells. It's looking at each of these cells, and the one with the largest one will get the rank of 1. I think it's actually this one over here. And we can sort of validate that by sorting this view. If we just go here and hit this button over here, you'll see that the rank correlates with whatever's there. And the index will automatically change to match that, because the index is just counting rows. It's always counting rows regardless of whatever's going on. So even if I go in reverse order, the rank will go in reverse order, but the index will stay exactly the same thing. So index is great for just creating row numbers in tables and just giving some sort of record identity to individual lines. Okay. Now the next two are sort of interesting. The first and last, but before I forget, there's actually another one which I like to use, which is a little hack. It's a ranking. If I do this, rank, and then inside of that I type index. So if you put an index inside of a rank, it basically counts in reverse order, and that is a little hack I like to use. So you can see here, this is what's going on. Let me put the index right back here. So you can see here that it's working. If I just sort this again from largest to smallest, you can see it's still doing the same thing. Those numbers aren't changing. The reason this is the case is because if you rank the index Yeah, the biggest index is 17. So the number 17 is larger than 1. So therefore it gets a rank of first, right? So it's just basically using the maths inside a Tableau to sort of hack this around. And this is nice because if you do want to sort of count in reverse order, this is a nice way of doing it. If you don't want to use rank, for example. And again, as you change your sorting, you know, this doesn't change. So the index and the rank index don't change their numbering as you change things in the view, which is a nice sort of use case for that. Okay. The next one is another function, which is called first. If I just type in first, you see that it's this one just over here. And if I enter that and just hit enter, you'll see we get another measure again. And the great thing about these is we're not having to really type anything into them. We're just using them sort of ad hoc. And this is one of those functions that counts like a computer. Okay, so this one starts at 0, and then it goes -1, -2, -3, and then all the way to 16. What this function is actually doing is it's looking at our data set, and it's essentially trying to create relative positions. So the thing that's, you know, at the very top is 0, and then everything else after that, it goes in reverse order. Okay, and if I do the exact opposite of that, which is last, and just hit enter and make that discrete, you'll see that that does the opposite. It assumes that the last thing is the first item, and then it counts up from that. So think of these functions as essentially choosing a sort of a starting point, and depending on where that starting point is, they either look back or look forward. Okay, and you can actually use those in lots of other calculation. When you're doing, for example, moving averages, sometimes what you can do is you can specify a specific row to start from by specifying a number, essentially. So you can say start from the second to last row, and this function will basically use these positionings to go and do exactly that. Okay, so there's quite a few in there that I've just used, but I use these all the time. I use them in ways you shouldn't use as well. And so I'll show you one. It's a really small thing, but I just find it the fastest way of doing this. So I'll just create a new sheet here, and I'm just going to bring in sales again onto text and order date onto rows. Okay, and what I want to do is get the month and make sure that's the continuous month. That's why I went down here, and then I'm going to make that discrete. And so we have a list of months. Okay, and sometimes in a data set, what you want to do is to show the most recent 6 records, for example, using a date or using something. But what you don't know is when the data is going to get updated. It might be that different things get updated at different times. So the most recent 6 doesn't sort of fall neatly into any sort of categorization that you can do. So one of the things I like to do, especially with dates, so anytime you have like KPIs, is I just go in here and I type in index and hit enter. Okay, and then I make this discrete. And then having made that discrete, I have this sort of nice count. Now, what I actually want to do is keep the most recent 6. So in this case, the index is working in the wrong order. So I actually want the rank index. So I'll double click in here. I'll do this. I'll just type in rank like this, and then index like that, and then close that off and hit enter, make that discrete. And now we're counting backwards. And now that I've done that, you might think, oh, great, I'll just put this into the filters pane. So I'll hold command. It doesn't let you do that. It doesn't, I don't know why. I think this is actually a bug. I've asked the question, but I'm not entirely sure. But you can get it in there by selecting the most, the last 6. And then once you selected them, you can select keep only, and somehow it magically ends up there. So I don't know why I can't just drag that in. It's a really weird behavior that I haven't sort of figured out why. Something I really should chase up on. But if I then just go here and hide this header, then here I've got the most recent 6, and it's just going to work. Now, the cool thing is if I then bring in a date item in here, and let's just say we choose the month year option and click next and click OK. And then I'm just going to show the filter. And what we're going to do is select all. And what I want you to see is the behavior on the left-hand side. Because we've got all the dates here, watch what happens when I deselect December. You'll see that it just brings in the next 6. So now whatever happens as I remove or add data in, it's always showing 6 things. So I sort of use this behavior, not in this crude way with a filter on the right and everything, but essentially I'm just using the filter to sort of simulate what happens as data gets added to this. Essentially things move out. So when you need to create like a nice little time window and you don't know when that data is going to get updated, but you know that there's always needs to be 6 to fill a space, this is one of those crude things that I do. So that's pretty much the first sort of set of functions I can't live without. It's a very, very sort of weird set of functions, but I just use them in lots of weird places, essentially throughout Tableau. By far, the most useful one of these is actually the rank function, because if I just open up the calculated field and I just type rank, and we just bring it up and we go rank over here, you actually get a bunch of different options with rank. So if I just sort of focus in on those over here, hopefully you can see this. You get rank dense, rank modified, rank percentile, and rank unique. These all basically rank in slightly different ways. So the rank dense and rank modified will look at things are sharing the same value a certain way. Will also sort of count in a slightly different way. So for example, if things are drawn, like say 1, 2, and 3 all have the same value, I think it's rank modified might actually skip the number and just goes to the next available number. So the behavior of all of these is really well documented, but that really gives you a way of looking at that. The other one is rank percentile, which basically gives you the percentile position of whatever you're sorting. So it's again another nice way of highlighting a position without necessarily sort of changing the skew. Okay, so let's just exit this, and I'll just minimize this a little bit because I need the space. And yeah, I'll leave that at that. Let me just rename this as counting, one of my basic sets of things. And what I'll do is I'll also stop the poll. If anyone's still doing that, I'll stop that now. And we'll go over to the next set of functions. These ones I'm sure everyone has used. So let's just bring in sales and orders and dates, and let's just set this to month. Okay, and so we got a nice little timeline here. For the record, it's drawing a line chart because this is set to automatic. If you wanted to, you could make this a bar and it would be a bar chart. But nonetheless, we'll leave this as a line chart because I think this is a nice way of seeing what we need to see. The set of functions I really want to focus in on aren't actually these functions. These are just the calculations and operations that Tableau actually does to get these things going. But if you've ever used any of these, let's say you use a running total, which is a nice simple one, you'll see that this generates a running total. And a little triangle will pop up next to your calculation here to tell you that this is a table calculation, essentially. And when you go to a table calculation, you've always got these options here to choose basically how the table calculations work. You've got the direction, you've got the level at which they work, and if you're really sort of a big geek, you can go into this and really customize it. If you haven't come across the resource that Andy Kriebel, a colleague of mine at the Information Lab, has created, it's essentially an English explainer for how this interface works, which is a really, really useful resource. So maybe I'll add that to the notes after the end of the session. Okay, so let me go ahead and close this. What I actually want to focus on is what's in this calculation. So Tableau creates this for you, but how many people actually go into this and look at this? And so if I double click on this, you'll see that this is actually a running sum of sales. Okay, so this is using a function that's sort of built into this. So this is like a really important thing, because once you realize that this is something you yourself can write, you can actually start to use this in other ways that make it much, much easier for you to create things that you typically maybe want to do in data prep or sometimes in an ETL process, which is sort of a little bit more organized. Okay. So that's one of them. That's running sum. Let's create another one in here. I'm just going to create the gnarliest view here and just see what happens. If it gets busy, we'll go to a slightly different one. So let's use this one and use difference. Okay. And when we create difference, what this does is it basically looks at the current row and then looks at the previous row and it calculates the difference. And in this case, it's just giving us the difference to the previous row. So you can see this particular record is 9,717 less than the previous record. That's pretty obvious. But if I double click in here and look at what it's written, in fact, what I'll do is I'll zoom in so you can see this a little bit more clearly. You'll see that it's written ZN sum of sales, and it's doing a lookup, which is something I'll come to in a second, and it's looking back one row. Okay, so if you know this, what you can then start to do is you can then start to sort of take this calculation and start to play with it. Okay, and that's actually something to do a lot. So if you maybe want to look at the previous 12 months of sales, because I know this is a monthly view, if I just do -12, I hit enter. Now what this is doing is it's comparing the month, year on year, month on month. So for example, if this is January 2018, it's actually comparing it to the January value the previous year, just to prove that. I don't want to be accused of sort of making stuff up here. So if we just get this value here, it says that this value is up 393 3,937. This value was 14,000. And if I go up here, you'll see this is 18,000. So 18,000 minus 14,000 equals roughly that. So you can then start to create sort of really nice sort of charts for this. A simple one you might do is a dual axis on this. And you probably want to set these to different colors like this. Okay. And what I've done here is actually not quite right, because I'm comparing a difference with the actual values. So what you might do instead is modify this and just say, instead of doing a difference, just show me the value from before. So here I'm literally modifying this function. I haven't written anything. I'm just working with what's in the view, and hit enter. And now these two are showing the same thing. I just need to make sure I synchronize these two. And now you can see 2 line charts, which is basically taking the value from 12 months ago and creating it sort of in the future. You do get this little weird message here, 12 nulls. And this makes sense because for the first section of the data, there is no data to compare it against. So that's where these 12 nulls essentially come from. Okay, so what you can do is you can just hide that indicator, just right click it if you want and hide that indicator. And then you can right click on this and hide the header as well. And you're done. So it's just sort of like an impassioned call that whenever you use one of these table calculations, just look inside it and see what's being created. I'm going to duplicate this one more time, and we're just going to, I'm going to bin these two. Don't want these anymore. I'm going to clear this table calculation, and we're just going to go back in. Go back to quick table calculation. And what I'm going to do is use percentage of total. Now in this one, there's another function here, which is the total function. And the total function is a nice way of essentially getting the total based on the table calculation that you've set. The easier way for me to show you this is to just draw a very simple table, category, subcategory. Annabelle's not on mute. There we go. So if I just bring in sales there, and what we will do is we'll just go in here, create calculation, and total is not something that a lot of people use, but again, I'll just show you what it does. Sometimes the big issue with these is that you never use them, so you just don't try them. And the thing with Tableau is it doesn't hurt to try. So so just do this, total sales, hit apply, click OK. I'm going to drag that into the box here, drop it in, and you'll see that all it does is it basically looks across the entire table and it gives me the total. And so when you create a percentage of total in Tableau, it's literally taking the sales and then it's comparing them to this number, and then it's giving you the percentage in return. But having that number is kind of useful, because what you can do is you can also change the scope of how this total works. Let's say that I look at the pane, which is, I'll draw the pane here first before I actually do the calculation. So this is the pane, okay? So if I then go here and then do the calculation and look at pane down, then you'll see that this number is just basically the total for the category. Okay, and so this is great if you need to do like a percentage of total and you need to be a little bit more sort of constrained, but also the fact that you can go into this table calculation and control how that total runs is really, really important. So if you're using these functions, always, please just try and go in there and have a look and see how they work. Just to give you sort of an idea of, let me just create a very quick note of the functions that the table functions use. So let's just open up a new note here and I'll put this on screen. I'll put this in my notes, so don't worry about capturing these. So notes from Tug. So these are the functions. If I just not make that a list and then just do that. There you go. So if I just move that there, I'm OCD, so these things need to line up. So these are the functions that Tableau is using all the time when you do those table calculations. So you've seen the lookup, we've had a look at running sum. The Zn function is essentially just basically always returning you a 0 if there is a null. And that stops certain calculations from breaking, because if you do like a mathematical operation with a null, then it's going to break the calculation essentially. The absolute will essentially just always return a number, whether it's negative or positive. Again, a really nice thing to do. The window calcs are really interesting. Let's just very briefly look at that. So again, I will create the cells here and we'll bring order date, drop it in. I will go to month, okay, and we will go in here, and I know that the moving average uses the window, okay, and if I double click on that and I just go across, you'll see that the window average basically looks at a window. Now you're probably wondering, well, what the hell is a window? Okay, well, in Tableau terms, you kind of give Tableau some scope to sort of look at the data. And so the way to think of a window is what perspective is Tableau going to use to calculate this moving average? Okay, so if I just bring in sales here and I put it just next to it below, in this case, the moving average that it's created looks back 3 rows. So I know it says -2, but remember it's a computer counting. So 0, -1, and then -2. So that's also telling you the direction that it's going in. So if I just annotate this very briefly, we're starting at 0 and we're going backwards. And you can sort of imagine this to be like this. So -2, -1, and 0. Okay. And so we're going in that direction. And so that means it's going to take the current row and look back 3. Now, obviously for this first record and second record and third record, we don't have that many records just yet. So the numbers don't quite sort of start building up. But after 3 values, your moving average is now doing the right thing. So you can see here that after 3 values, this starts to make a lot of sense. And it's basically working. And the window in this particular case, if I see how good my highlighting is basically that. Okay, so that's the window that we're specifying. We're saying look back 3 rows. And then all that happens is as the calculation sort of operates, the calculation is just traveling in that direction. So this is like a window that's constantly moving. You could define the scope of the window as being the entire view, and then it will never move. But then that doesn't make sense because you might as well use like a running sum or a running average or something like that. Okay, so that's essentially how it works. If you want to change that scope, you can go in here and change that. Like if I want to say -5 to give us 6 months back, you'll see that this line starts to smooth out. Now notice because I edited that in the calculation window, it became a calculation. But if I what did I do there? I reset my view. So let's clear the axis range there and clear the axis range there. Oh no, what did I do? This range here also got fiddled. I used the shortcut I shouldn't have. That's my bad. So if I just go back here, if I just go back, actually go back a couple more steps. I should have just used back in the first place. Back one more time. Great. So now you can see here sum of sales is back to normal. Tableau doesn't know that I've changed it. If I go in here and click edit calculation, you can actually see that it gives you this sort of nice interface for editing this number. So all you're doing when you specify this number is you're just telling Tableau, go back, 0 is the first record. So if you go back to 5, then that's actually 6, hit enter, and that will change. And now if I go in there and double click that, you'll see that that number is now what it is. So I might be saying something obvious to many of you, but it's just really important to just get really comfortable with these functions, because then you can use them how you want. You know, if you change this and you say, okay, this is 6 for whatever reason, and now you've got that there, and you just drag it into this calculation window on the left, and now you've got your 7-month moving average for sales, and now that's locked in as a calculation. Rather than constantly having to sort of fiddle around with these interfaces, just lock them in. If they're standard ranges that you always use, just lock them in. Okay, so I'm not going to sort of drum that beat too much more. If I just go here back to this list, that's pretty much everything. The rank function we've already briefly touched on. Total we've also touched on very briefly. So those are, again, great functions to just get comfortable with. Everyone who uses Tableau should really be comfortable with these, because once you know these, trust me, most calculations will just become a breeze. Okay. Now, the next set of calculations are LODs. I'm not going to dive into these too much. I'm not going to try and explain them too much for 2 reasons. Number one, Jim is actually following me, and he's going to be touching on order of operations, which is a really important concept for that. And secondly, if I was to go into these in a lot of depth, it would take me half an hour just to explain one in the best of my ability. So definitely make sure you're paying attention to Jim's session as soon as mine's done. And more importantly, if you still want to know more about these, definitely go out and sort of look at the content in the community. I have videos. Many people have done great content on this, so definitely go and check it out. But what I want to do is I want to try and lower the barrier so that if LODs are something that, you think is, it's too difficult, I only know how to use fixed, I don't really understand exclude and include. What I want to try and do is lower that sort of hurdle a little bit so that hopefully today you can go jump it later on. Okay, so let's go in. I'm gonna use tables here because again, these are just the simplest ways of doing this. So I'm going to drag this onto labels, good old subcategory and category. I've got a fun question coming up, by the way, so look forward to that. Now here we are, category and subcategory, very, very simple view. Okay, I'm going to start in an unusual place. I feel like most people have probably used fixed. If you haven't, don't worry, we'll come to that in a second. What I want to start with is exclude. Okay, the exclude function. What on earth does that do? It sounds like it takes something away from the view, and that is actually exactly what it does. In the simplest form, what the exclude function will do is you're basically telling Tableau to do an aggregation before something has been added to the view. So let me just sort of talk a bit about that for a second, okay? In my visualization, I have 2 dimension and 1 measure. So let's just highlight these to you. So these are the 2 dimensions and this is the measure, okay? So the concept that's really important here is the viz level of detail is based on category and subcategory. So when I come to my LOD and I start typing exclude, the exclude function is always working in context with what's in the viz level of detail. In fact, include and exclude are the only 2 functions in the LOD expressions. Well, there's only 3 of them, so I don't know why I said that. But essentially, those are the 2 functions that basically work in conjunction with whatever's in the visualization. Yeah. So when I then go in here and type exclude subcategory and hit enter, and then go on and finish doing my aggregation, we just do a simple sum of cells here. You'll see that essentially this calculation is valid. So let's just type exclude sum of cells. Okay, I can't even type, and hit apply. And if I just bring that into the view, okay, you'll see that, okay, it seems to be doing what we saw the total function doing, okay? And it is actually doing exactly that, but it's doing it in a slightly different way, okay? What it's doing is it's essentially happening, the order of operations is important here because of when it happens, okay? So this is happening after any dimensional filters, okay? So again, order of operations will come in a bit. But what you have to imagine is first, Tableau goes and calculates these values, okay? And then having calculated those values, it goes and looks at the next thing in the order of operations, and that says, hey, I'd like you to calculate this aggregations without subcategory involved. So then it goes up here, it grabs the subcategory, and then it says, right, you're coming out of the view. So I'm going to just use this gray space as a signal of what's going on. And it basically just returns the value that's left for all the relevant rows in every single row. So this 742,000 is almost as if I never brought the subcategory into the view, okay? So that's exactly what that in the simplest form, that is what the exclude function does. It basically looks at the visualization and it says, hey, if I see subcategory there, take it out. And I want you to return the aggregation that would have happened had it not been there. Okay. And so let's just put that in there. And you'll see that now my cells carry on as normal, but now my exclude is staying at that total that it was before. Surprise, surprise, include does the exact opposite. And to show you that, that's a slightly more difficult one to show you because it's not sort of obvious to see. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this view. And I'm going to end up with lots of sheet numbers here. I'm going to end up with one of those nasty workbooks with like sheet 60 by the end of this session. Hopefully not, but let's wait and see how it goes. Okay, so let's remove the exclude function and just go back to the normal one. And we're going to go in here and we're going to use the include function. Okay, so let's go in. Actually, in order to do this, I'm going to remove subcategory and I'm going to bring the subcategory in using the include function. Okay, so let's go in, let's create a calculation and let's do include. Let's do this, include, I can't type today, include, and we're going to do subcategory and sum of cells. And I still can't type because I should just use auto. I can hear like 1,000 people telling me just use autocorrect. That's probably the case. But anyway, here we are. Include subcategory sum of cells. So include, and I'm just going to use that. I'm not going to bother with that. And we're just going to bring that in and boom, you see nothing different. Okay, so what is this actually doing? Well, you don't really see anything when you use the sum, because of course the sum is adding everything up. And given the way this calculation works, a more challenging calculation would actually be the average. Okay, and so before we go to the average, I've got a fun little question sort of to engage everyone. I'm going to put up that poll up again, and if I just go back to the poll, so I want you to head to this. Oh, I can't look at it. So go to this QR code again, and I want you to just go in there and answer the question. You'll see the correct answer once you've answered it. So really encourage people to go in there and see what's going on. So let's see how many people get this correct. Okay, so okay, this is interesting. This is really fascinating. So I'll before I bring it on screen, I'll wait and see what's going on. Okay, this is good. This is really fascinating. We had 200 people. I'm not going to carry on until we get at least 400. I want a decent sample here. Keep going. We're nearly there. 350, 366. Come on, 20 more people. Get your phones out, and we're at 400. Amazing. Okay, so I'll bring the answer onto the screen here just so that you can see. So hopefully, if you've done it, you'll have seen the correct answer. The correct answer is actually each row is an item in an order. Okay, it's this is a really important concept of granularity in the data set. Okay, more people are still doing it. Let me just sort of break that down and explain why. Okay, so let's just go back into our sheet view. Okay, now if I switch this to averages, so let's close this because I don't think I need it anymore, and let's just switch this to an average. Okay, the average sales suddenly goes down from being, what was it, 742,000 to being just 350. Okay, and if I go into this one and I select average, you'll see that this average is 185,000, 79,000, and 209,000. So how are these vastly different? Well, again, let's think about what's going on here. So this 350, the easiest way to show you this is to just go to a new view and just bring in category here. And then I think I need to bring in order, ID, and then I think I need to add all of them. Yes, just keep this one. And then we need to also bring in, there's a couple of areas where this isn't going to be exactly correct. So order ID, add all members. And then once I've done that, I'm just going to bring in orders count and see if I've got that down. Yeah, I think I've got that. There are a couple of these which will say 2 because there's actually, there's some data issues built into Superstore sales essentially, but we've got this number now. Okay. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring sales in. So you'll see that now I have every single sales value in here. And so the average is actually going to be all of these added together divided by the number of records, which is actually 2,119. An easy way of doing that and showing you that is to go into here to the show summary. This opens up this really nice calculator that I wish loaded up here on the left-hand side. And for this set of values, you can see that the average is 350. So that number that we saw earlier on, if I take all these columns and I divide them by the number of rows, you get 350. If I go back, that is what this is actually calculating. Okay, so it's literally working at the row level of detail. So if you don't have a solid handle on the granularity, and it's sort of embarrassing to say, but more than half of you didn't get that right. So this is something that's so fundamental because averages just won't look the same to you ever again. Okay, and so what is the include function doing here? Well, if I go back one, you'll see that essentially what it's essentially telling Tableau to do is to go do the aggregation of sum of sales. Okay, and it's doing it with subcategory in the visualization. So I'm using my exclude view here, but what I'm actually looking at is this one over here. Okay, and it's adding all of these up. Okay, and then in my visualization, I'm asking it to do the average. And so what the average will do is it will actually take these 5 values, add them up and divide them by 5. And that is why on this one, you get 185,500. Just to sort of validate that to you, if I click on each of these, you'll see 742,000, divide that by 4. I'm fairly certain that's going to be that. In fact, what I should just do is just bring it in here. not the caption, the summary, honestly. Bring that in here. And now if I just highlight these, you'll see that it's 185,000 over here on the right-hand side. So all those numbers here, that's the average. So the include function is just as simple as the exclude function. It does the exact opposite. It brings a number into the view. Then whatever aggregation you run after that happens after that has been done. Again, it's manipulating the way order of operations work, and it's manipulating the viz level of detail. Okay. So that's include and exclude. Hopefully, I've brought those brought those within reach for a whole bunch of people. The last one I'll obviously do, this is a standard demo almost. So I think everyone pretty should be comfortable. But if you've never used the fixed function, maybe you're new to Tableau, this is a great time to get to know this function. So I'll just do the classic example, which is I'll bring in sales here and I'll bring in category in front of it. And the classic thing you'll want to do is a percentage of total. So we use the total function. So let's just create a total function here. Oh, I've already got one here. Where did it go then? Where's total sales? There it is. Hey, put that into the view. So you'll see here, this is the total, okay? And what I'll do is I'll do an ad hoc calculation by just dragging this into that view and then divided by that just after. Hit enter and you get a number. You might be panicking, what's going on here? Well, it's just because the number is formatted funny. So I just need to tell Tableau that this is a percentage. So let's go to percentage and we'll just do there's no decimal places. And if I'm looking at this, something looks suspicious. Why does this not look right? This doesn't look like it's adding up. What have I done wrong here? Table down, that's fine. Oh, was this based on something? No, this is all. Is this right? Let's just check. So let's double check this. I'm not convinced this is correct. Oh no, it is 1. Okay, I just can't do maths. That's reassuring. Something doesn't look right about that. But long story short, what I'm actually trying to show you is that when I start to remove these, the total starts to change, because what it's constantly doing is it's recalculating the total across the entire data set, and this total value is disappearing. So what you can do, if you want to keep that percentage working correctly every single time, is you can just essentially create an LOD to have that fixed. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to say, hey, fixed at the subcategory. No, is that not correct? Not fixed as a subcategory. Fixed at the, let's just think about this for a second. No, I don't want to do that. I'm going to create a little hack here. I think because I got those numbers wrong, I'm falling off track here. So I'm just going to I'm going to call this like a helper calculation, right? Just to make sure everything's correct. So click apply and click all. So what I've done here is I've just created a string across every single row. If I bring that into the view, you'll see exactly what it does. It just creates something that's on every single row. Then I can sort of hack around and I can just say, okay, fix to basically this all function. Yeah. I want you to go and do the sum of cells. And because I know this record is on every row, basically it will always bring the total across the entire data set, which is what I want for the cells. So entire data set sum, hit apply, hit OK. And now if I bring that in, you'll see that even as I remove things, let's say I remove a whole office supply section, the number remains the same. So it doesn't matter what I take out, the number remains the same. So what I can now do is I can now write a new calculation that does this correctly, which will be this one, sum of cells. So bring that in, divided by, oh, I can't get that in, come on. Should never do calculations in this tiny window. Note to self for the future. Okay, and then again, we've got the percentage problem. So I'll go back in and I'll change this to percentage. And there we go. It doesn't matter what happens. If I filter the data set, if I just remain with one number, this will say 100%, this will say 5%, because it's always got the context of the entire data set in the view. Now, the great thing about Fix is you can actually add multiple dimensions, so you can really lock down the aggregation level, okay? Right, I think I'm pushing for time a little bit. So what I will do is I'll do one last one. This is actually, I think it's a sleeper function. I think lots of people are sleeping on this, okay? So this is using something called regex. Now let me bring in a data set into the view, okay? And you'll see this data set, okay? And what got me working on this is actually I was given a data set from a fast-moving consumer goods company, and they had essentially promotions that were entered into a text field. But the problem with the promotion is they require the creativity of a promotion manager. Let's say you work in an organization, you call up a shop and say, hey, let's do a promotion. You might come up with an ad hoc promotion. So it would say something like 2 for £3 or 1 for 10 cents, whatever currency you're working at. It would be very, very messy. And basically, it was always the same language, but in slightly sort of different setups. So I initially said, this is going to be a pain to figure out. All right, you need to find a more structured way of doing this. And then someone mentioned to me, hey, you should check out regex. And essentially what regex allows you to do, let me just open up the calculation window here and just type in regex. And what I need to do is open this as well. There are a couple of regex functions, okay? And what it allows you to do is essentially match a pattern in text using an instruction. And the instruction is just basically how that text appears, okay? And then having done that, it lets you do 3 things. It lets you either extract the data. So you can see here, we've got 2 extract functions. We've then got a match function, which is basically going to return true if something is a match to that pattern that you specified. And then the last one is replace, which is it's going to go find the thing that you specified with the pattern, then it's going to replace it, okay? And what I will say is that in Tableau, the way the calculation window works, this is not the best place to be writing your functions because you can't actually see how the match is working. And most people who've used regex will tell you that you need to be able to see what it's actually doing. So what I've done is I've set up a very, very quick starting point here. I will send you a test of this, a link to this so you can look at this yourself. And so let's just go over here. So here we go, here it is. And this is the same data set, but what I'm using is a tool called Regex 101. Now I can hear 1,000 people going, oh, what's this? I don't have to code in Tableau. What are you showing me here? Okay. Well, this is basically an interface that allows you to learn and practice regex. Okay. And it's a nice, safe place to sort of come and test stuff and get things working. And I thought it was a really good place just to show you how it works. Then we're going to put it back into Tableau. And what we're trying to do is essentially extract the email from this text. Now, if you've looked at this text, you're probably looking at this and going, how on earth are we going to get the email? And to sort of discerning eye, there is no sort of structured pattern to this, except for what I can tell you is that it looks like the beginning is always a row number. So it just goes 1 all the way down to 1,000. Okay. So it starts with a number and then it comes with the email address. So if I just look at this first one here, it's this weird email at google.italia. Then we've got a code at the very end. Okay, so that's our pattern. Now the code at the very end, we can fix that easily with a write function. Yeah, just go write and then take the number of characters. And that's pretty much always going to work because it seems to be the same number of characters. So the question just remains, how do we extract the email? Because the email is always like an unknown set of characters. And it's also not necessarily always work the same. Sometimes you have emails with 2 dots rather than just 1 dot. So here comes Regex to the rescue. Now, all fair, like I don't know what I'm doing. I think I know what I'm doing. So I'm confident enough to pretend I know what I'm doing essentially. So let's just sort of walk through this. Now, on the right-hand side, to show you where I'm looking at, I'm looking over here. That was a really bad triangle. Let's try again in blue. I'm looking over here on the right-hand side. So this has a quick reference guide, and this quick reference guide is literally my crutch throughout this whole entire experience with Regex. So what I will do is I'll just look at this, and you'll see that I can match a bunch of stuff. So you'll see here that it says any digit. Okay, so let's just do that. I'll just type \D, and you'll see that it goes and finds all the numbers. But the problem here I have is that it's gone and found all the numbers in the text. What I really want to do is make sure that it just matches things at the start of the line. Okay, and so here you can see here that you can specify to Regex to start at the beginning of the string. Don't go finding it everywhere. Just do it at the start of the string. So I'll go in here and I'll type one of these up arrows, and that's a string. And now you'll see that it's got all the numbers at the side of the string, except for when you start to get into double digits, it's lost the number again. And we go all the way down to hundreds, it's lost the number again. So again, there's another little quick reference guide here. All I'm doing is I just read these essentially the first time I used it. And you can actually match one or more of a particular character just by adding a plus. So basically what I'm saying here is at the beginning of the line, find any number, 1 or more number of times, okay? So if I hit a plus, you'll see that this has now reliably picked out the numbers at the beginning of the record. So let's just grab that, go over back to Tableau, and we're going to write our calculation to do that, just to grab that row number as a starting point. Okay, so let's just type in this in Regex extract, and we're going to bring in our mixed function in here, click comma, and then what we have to do here is we have to do speech marks. So let me just zoom that in so everyone can see that more clearly. And once you've got that set up, this is your function, and then inside of these speech marks is where you put the regex notation. Okay, so we'll just call this row ID, hit apply, and now as I drag that in, you'll see that it's not worked. So let's find out why. So let's go back into this and let's just double check this. I think I know why. I have this a couple of times. If I copy this and I paste this in, I think I copied the wrong thing, which is my own fault. So if I put that in, and I don't need the global and I don't need that one. That's exactly the same thing. Okay, why is that not working? I think because I haven't specified a capture group. That might be why. So what I should do here, let me explain that in more detail. So in here, all I did was I found the number, but what I didn't do is specify a capture group. So a capture group is done by using a brackets. You can see these turn green. So now this is ready to be extracted. So if I go back to Tableau, you can see here that it actually does specify that you need to put them inside of a capture group. Okay, so here you can see that it's saying put them in brackets. So that was my error. And now if I hit apply, you can see that's worked. So now I've reliably pulled all the numbers from the beginning of the string. It doesn't matter if they're 5, 10 numbers, it's always going to pull that, which is great. Okay. Now fast forward a little bit more and we can start to build an email string. So this is basically going to be a little bit more involved. So for this one, what we need to now do is specify what comes next. And in this particular case, I'm going to delete these brackets because I'm not wanting to capture that anymore. And I'm just going to put new brackets in there, and I'm going to start specifying what comes next. So I'm going to say any letters from A to Z, so A to Z, okay, any number from 0 to 9, okay, and so that's sort of a good starting point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put a little square around this, and what that does is it basically creates a little compartment of what to go look for. So let's go hit that and do that. And then once I've done that, I can tell it to repeat that little search. So those squares basically say, here's a way of finding something. Now go find it as many times as you can until you basically hit a roadblock. So if I hit a plus, you'll see that it gets pretty much everything up until the @ sign. Okay. Now emails are more complex than that. Sometimes you have a hyphen, for example, and sometimes you have like a what do you call it? Like a dot, and sometimes you have lots of different characters. Now, if I just type in a dot, this is going to break because a dot actually does something else in Regex. So I have to escape it with a backslash, and then that will start to work a lot better. I might actually also need to escape this hyphen, I think, because in Tableau, I'm not sure that's going to work exactly as I want it to. Long story short, you keep building out this sort of regex notation, just working your way. You find the @ sign, you just hit @ here, and you're just describing to Tableau how this looks. I can even almost cheat here by just grabbing this again and putting this here, and you'll see it carries on. Like these things are just carrying on, and I'm slowly describing the pattern to Tableau. Okay, now if you're trying to do this from scratch and you're doing something as easy as emails, you don't need to do this. You can just go online and look at an example. So for this one, I'm actually going to load up this nice little article, which is on a tutorial site from Envato for web developers. And if I go down, it actually turns out Regex is what they use to do form validation when you're filling out a form. So if I go down here, I'll actually find one already done for email, which kind of exactly describes how an email should be described using this notation. And you can see I kind of got there, kind of not really. I missed out this sort of underscore. And also I didn't really account for domains with multiple dots. But what I can do, I've got one that I made earlier on. If I just grab this little thing just off screen and go back to the regex link here, I'm just going to replace this with the function that I wrote earlier on. And you can see that pretty much is going to return everything that I need. The thing that I need to add back on here is the little up arrow, the D, the backslash D, and then plus. Okay, and that will go and grab what I need. So I'm going to grab this little text, go back into Tableau, And instead of this row ID, we're going to call this email. I'm just going to hit apply so that we know, okay, email already exists. I must have created it before. So email 2, hit apply. Okay. And then what I can do is I can just go in here, replace this inside of this. And I know that looks a little bit daunting, hit apply. But if I just look at this, it's kind of extracted the right information, but something is missing. So let me just double check this. What is missing here? So no, that's the right capture group. Click OK, hit apply. Okay, I think I'm going to here we go. What's going on here? And why does it think I've already got an email? Here we go. So let's not use the extract, and let's show hidden fields. Ah, here we go. I'd already created. Oh, because there's actually an email in the data set. That's my bad. So I should have double checked that before. But I think I've missed like a character here, and I'm not going to try and debug this in front of people. I'm going to use too much time. But long story short, you can keep developing this until you get really, really powerful extraction mechanisms. I'll show you an example that I was talking about in relation to the fast-moving consumer goods company. So I baked this up in advance. This is actually the dummy data set. So this is what I need here. So this is a very simple example. I say very simple. This took me about 3 or 4 days to figure out and get properly right, and I had to learn sort of regex in the process. But this is the example. So you can see here that this test string here has a bunch of information about promotions, and the challenge was to extract the information about promotions from this text field, and it wasn't all in the same place, and it was all very ragged. And so this really sort of convoluted long statement over here is actually what got that information out of that. And then once it was out, I was able to do a manual grouping to get the percentage promotions, the multi-buy promotions, and the price promotions all in separate sort of groups of data. Then we could start doing some interesting sort of computation on top of that. Okay, so I've definitely overrun my time here. I think I need to stop. But hopefully that's been a useful guide. What I will do is I will put everything up in the links that's going to go out. And yeah, thank you very much. I'll hand back to Annabelle or Sedale.
Cool.
Please, Sedale.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, thank you. This was awesome. Lots of people got a ton out of it. We do need to jump over to Jim, but one consensus question that we've got easily 30 likes for is the screen share program you use to get the pointers and things.
That is like the #1 question that everyone asks on my YouTube channel. So I'm on a Mac, and the app I use is called Percentile, and it's this really, really cool tool. Check it out. I made a video how I make videos. The link is in that, but I'll add it to the notes as well after this talk, so everyone gets it through that.
Awesome. And then if you have time, if you don't mind heading to the Q&A, there's a bunch of other questions.
I'll go in there now and have a look. Yeah, cool.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go ahead and pass it over to Jim. 1 second, just so I can give him a proper introduction. So Jim, also a Zen Master, most notably a forum ambassador. If you have been in the Tableau forums before, you have seen his name somewhere, somehow, for sure. Jim is primarily an engineer, which is how he kind of comes into the Tableau world. But his knowledge of LODs, order of operations, is quite frankly unmatched. So I am very happy to have him here to talk about this because it's a very important topic. It's also the topic, at least I find, most people struggle with, or most people have trouble getting their heads around. So much so that Jim also has a whole series on it, which I hope he'll talk about a little bit to help others get better at how all of this works. His passion is really around helping new users and students in their journey to learn Tableau, and has a lot of how-tos and use cases on his blog as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jim to talk about putting your operations in order.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, I'm just going to slide this off to the side here. Okay, very good. First, thanks for allowing me to be here today. I'm just thrilled. I mean, this is a users group that's really near and dear to my heart. You guys are analytics, and I really enjoy analysis. And what I want to talk about today is the order of operation and what it does and how it really controls the actual worksheet that you're creating. It's a worksheet by worksheet thing. I'm sorry, I just have to move this over again. Just real quick, I live in Nashville, and that's in the middle of the US, and it's about noon my time. My background is not as a data scientist, and I don't have a real IT background. I'm an engineer. And when I first started learning Tableau, I found it pretty difficult to make that transition from Excel over to Tableau. And I kind of had to translate everything into terms that I understood. And you know, as Sedale said, I'm now a 4-time Tableau ambassador. I think I may have run into some of you before. If I had, out on the forum, it was a pleasure doing that. I am also a Zen Master. Today, what I want to talk about is the order of operation. And I know there's several different models for the order of operation, but I use this 10-step model. And what the order of operation actually does, as you create each one of your individual worksheets, you've input some data into Tableau. You uploaded either a flat file or something that came out of a database. And that's a starting point. That's the data that you loaded into Tableau. But for each one of your worksheets, you're going to create a separate data table. And you'll hear us talk about that data table as the underlying table or the underlying data or just the data table. And you create that worksheet by taking dimensions and applying them as headers to the rows and columns on that worksheet. And as you do that, you create the structure for a data table. And as you filter those dimensions, you're changing the structure of that table. Once that structure is created, you fill that table with values, do some math, maybe do a little more analysis on it, and then decide what your end view is going to look like, and you come up with your end view. I like to think of the order of operations in 3 groups. The first group operates at the workbook level, and those are filters that filter out data so it never gets in your workbook, and it improves the performance of your overall workbook. The next 3 steps in the order of operation create that data table. They're the ones that filter out data and create the data table. And then the last 5 steps load data into that table, and it allows you to do some calculations and come up with your actual viz. Let's take a look at the first 2 steps. It's extract filters and data source filters. And what you're literally doing at this point is, I've got a data table. Hang on just a second. I keep running into a problem with covering up things that I shouldn't be covering up with pictures and the like. I'm sorry about that. There. Okay. This is just a Superstore data set. This is shipped with every copy of Tableau. You've got it in your data also. And if I look at the data source, well, I want to look here first. If we open up this icon right here, this will show you the total data source. And that data source contains about 10,000 rows of data. Now, if I go to the data source tab, and I come up here in the corner, I want to apply some data source filters. And we can start applying the data source filters, and we're just going to filter on order date. And this should start looking familiar. These are the type of filters, discrete filters that you use elsewhere. And I only want to look at the last 2 years. And you'll see that this says, the data source filter says, I'm only going to keep 20 and 21. I'm only going to keep 2 of the years. And when I do that and come back to my data source, you can see there's only 2020 and 2021. But more importantly than that, when I go back and I look at the data that's actually in Tableau, now there's only 6,000 rows of data. We've eliminated 4,000 rows of data. It's not there, so now the workbook's going to operate more efficiently. Now the remaining 8 steps operate at the worksheet level. And for each one of your worksheets, you're going to create a subset of that total data and for that particular sheet. And that's all the data that's going to be available on that sheet. You create that subset as you apply dimensions to your worksheet, and it's done in the 3 steps here by applying context filters, creating sets, fixed LODs, and top-end calculations, and dimension filters. That combination is going to create the structure for that data set. Now, this is also the area where we get most questions come up about the confusion of when I apply context filters, what do context filters really do? What about dimensional filters? When are they applied? Just want you to remember that context filters precede the creation of fixed LODs, sets, and top-end, and dimensional filters happen thereafter. Let's see what happens when we apply these to an LOD calculation. Now I've got a very simple data set. I got to keep things simple. I'm just an engineer here. And my data set is fruits and vegetables, and there's a few types of produce named. I've got price and quantity, and the total is just price times quantity. And then I created an LOD. And this LOD, very simple to look at. All it does is it says, hey, at the type level, at the fruit or vegetable level, I want to see the sum of the total cost. And you can see here, there's the LOD calculation, $5.75 and $2.63. I've also placed produce in the context filter. You know it's in the context filter because it's grayed out. Context filters are applied before the LOD is calculated. So if I come back and I filter out banana, you can see the value, bananas have been filtered out before the LOD was calculated. So now the value of the LOD is $3.75. On the other hand, if I remove produce from context and apply it as a dimension filter after the LOD is calculated, filter out banana, the value doesn't change. The LOD value is still $5.75. We see questions on the forum all the time. You know, somebody will write in and say, hey, I want to create a calculation that ignores the filter. Well, the calculation in Tableau don't ignore filters. They don't decide, you know, I'm going to use the filter this time or not use it. You as a developer decide when you want the filter applied. If you want the filter applied before the LOD is calculated, then you put it in context. If you want it after, then you put it in as a dimension filter afterwards. Let's see what happens when we look at a set. And it's the same data set, and all I've done is add a top 3 set filter. And we're just going to look at what's in the set versus what's out of the set. So right now, the top 3 values include apples, bananas, and green beans. I'm going to just look at the inset because it's a little easier to see what's going on then. Once again, I got produce name in context, and I'm going to filter out bananas again. And when I do that, I get 3 values. I get apples, green beans, and spinach. Bananas have been filtered out. They were filtered out before the set was created. Now see what happens when we remove produce from context, and we come back and we filter out bananas. And now I'm only going to get 2 values. I'm only going to get apples and green beans because we filtered out bananas after they were put in that top 3. We'll get questions all the time. Hey, I wanted 3 values. I only got 2 values. What did I do wrong? What do I have to do? We filtered out the 3rd value after the value was calculated. Now I want to take a look at step 5. The application of dimension filters, and you're very familiar with those. I mean, you use them all the time. It's probably one of the first things you learned how to use when you started using Tableau. But I want to look at them in a little different context right now. And I want to see how they change the structure of the data table that underlies the specific worksheet. This is that Superstore data set again. We're just going to take a look over here and show the, come on, Tableau, there you go. It's 10,000 rows of data, but I can also look up here under analysis, And I can view the data here with a similar looking icon. And this will tell us how many rows of data are in the worksheet or in the data table for this particular worksheet. And right now there's 10,000 rows of data. So I can come here and I can filter out office supplies, and the view has changed. You're familiar with that. You know what that looks like. The view has changed. I still have 10,000 rows of data in the workbook, but we've changed the structure of the data table for this particular worksheet. And now there's only 4,000 rows of data in this worksheet. We're changing the structure of the table. We're filtering out data. So on this sheet, there's 4,000 rows of data, but there's still 10,000 rows available for other worksheets anytime we want to use them. So what's happening here, when we go through the first 5 steps of the order of operation, we bring data into Tableau. Then on each worksheet, we decide how much of that data we want to include on the data table that underlies that sheet. And that's a worksheet by worksheet determination of what's going to be on that in that data table. Now in the remaining steps of the order of operation, what we're going to do is we're going to load that data table with values, and then we're going to do some math. And like Tim showed us, we include and exclude is in there, but we're going to do some math, and we can put in some calculations, come back and do some totals and do table calculations. But they happen in a specific order. It's the sequence that Tableau goes through when creating each worksheet. I want to take a look at blending data that's happened in step 6 of the order of operation. And blending data is a way of combining data, primarily from different data that's coming from different sources. You usually have to blend that data. You also use it when you have data that's coming at different levels of aggregation. Like we're going to look at here, we've got some sales by month, and then we've got some goals by year, different levels of aggregation. But when you blend data, the data from the secondary source is always in aggregate, and it's aggregated at the level of the link, or we used to call it the link, now we call it the blend relationship, and it always limits the functionality that's available in Tableau. For those reasons, my advice is whenever you can, join data, union data, try to avoid using blending, but if you have to use it, you have to use it. Okay. I've got a couple of different data sets here. First, my sales data, and I've got sales by month and by category. And I've got goals, and goals are by category and by year. There are different levels of aggregation. So when I bring them together and blend them together, sales is going to be my primary data set. Annual goals are going to be the secondary data set. And I'm going to just open this up to show you the blend relationship between these two. And you can see that it's at the category and the year level. Okay, and I can see that I'm sorry. Okay, I've got sales by years and I've got goals by year. Now I've also got another dimension that I'm going to bring to the data set. Okay. And I've got 2 segments. I've got a consumer segment and I've got a corporate segment. But I don't have a link. I don't have a blend relationship at the segment level. So you can see that the goals for consumer and the goals for corporate are the same. They came across aggregated at the level of the link, which was sales and category. Okay. Now I can try to filter, and when I apply the filter, I still see the goal for the entire data set. I don't see the corporate goal, but I do see the corporate sales. And as we said before, when you create the data table in steps 3 through 5, all the dimensional filters are applied. Blending takes place in step 6 after those filters have been created, after the data table has been created, and you can no longer filter across the 2 data sets. Well, maybe I can just go in and calculate an LOD, and I just come back and create an LOD at the segment level, because that's really what I want to see. I want to see the a fixed segment, and then I want to see the annual goal. But you can see I get an error message. And the error message I get says, hey, wait, LODs have to be all the values in the LOD have to come from the same data source. And the reason that happens is it's the same reason. LODs are calculated, and fixed LODs are calculated in step 4, the order of operations. You can't come back and blend data and use it in an LOD in step 6 because the LOD was fixed at step 4. Okay. I want to move on to step 7. And step 7 in the order operation are the other 2 types of LODs. Those are include and exclude. And Tim did a great job of explaining include and exclude. So we're going to kind of hurry through this. I looked at a very simple data set. The data set that I've got here represents sales through a toy store. And the toy store has customers. It has a couple of product lines. Each product line has a couple of products, and products come in color. I want to take a look at the include statement and how include would work. And my data set looks like this. We're going to come back and look at average quantities. Like Tim showed you, average is good to use because you can really see changes here. And I'm going to take the simple average. The simple average is calculated by the sum of quantity divided by the number of records that make up that quantity. So that's a simple average. And what I'd also like to do is I'd like to take a look at this statement, the include statement we're going to look at here. And this statement says, look, at the product level, I want to sum the quantity. Very simple. I'm going to sum the quantity, and I'm going to take the average of that. And you can see when I'm down below the level that I've aggregated at, the values are the same. Now, when I move up a level, all of a sudden I'm seeing that the values are different. The include statement's returning 24.5 versus 12.25 for the simple average. Well, what happened here? Well, what happened is at the product level, that's 25, and this is 24. So when we go to the product level include, we're at 24.5, the average at the product level. As we go up one higher level, we're still at that level. The include statement is going to allow you to calculate and hold that average at the level that you specify, in this case, the product level. Now, how about the exclude value? I like to look at it this way. I'm kind of a visual person, and I like to see what's happening here visually. This is Superstore data, and we're looking at the value of sales by state. And in the view, I've also got region. I've got a dimension in the calculation for region, but I'd like to see the sales value at the region level. And one way I can do that, and this is what Tim was showing also, is I can do that with an exclude statement. And we're literally looking at what's on the visual at this point. We're not talking about what's below the visual in the data table. We're talking about what's in the viz itself. And I've got 2 dimensions. I've got state and I've got region. And all we're saying here is don't include state when you calculate the sum of totals. So what's the next higher level? Well, the next higher level is region. And when we look at the region level now, we can now see we've got the regional sales and the state sales on the same view. And we can use that in another calculation to determine what the percent of sales was by each state in each region. So include is looking, and like Tim said, include is looking below the level of the viz, and it's looking down in the data table. Exclude is looking at the level of the viz and deciding what measures you want to use in the calculation. Step 8 in the order are the application of measure filters. Now, we talked about dimension filters that are up in step 5, and they affect the structure of the data table. And once the structure of the data table is determined, it determines what values are included in the data table. Measure filters are applied to the value that are in the data table. And I've got my toy store example here again. And I've got it fully expanded. And what I want to do is I want to bring quantity up to the filter shelf. And when I do that, this window opens up, and I've got my choice on how I want to apply the filter. And this first level says all values. And to my engineer way of thinking, it really should say at the row level in the data table that's underneath what we see here. And that's what we're going to look at. And I just want the values less than 15. Okay. And you can see I'm now looking at values in this table that are 15 or less. I can go to the next level. And you say, hey, wait a minute, Jim, this value of 24, that's greater than 15. Why am I seeing that value? Well, we're seeing that because we're at the row level, the value is 15 or less. And when I go to the next higher level, it gets totaled in. And we see the sum of the values that are less than 15 at the row level. We could have, when we brought quantity to the table, to the filter shelf, we could have used sum as our aggregation and looked at, again, less than 15. And when we do that, at this level, it looks the same. I'm seeing values between 1 and 15. When I go to the next level, we're only seeing values that have been aggregated. And at the level of the viz, they're 15 or less. So we're looking at row level data, less than 15. And here we're looking at the aggregated level of less than 15. That brings us to step 9 in the order, and that's totals, grand totals. And I want to just take a quick look at this. There's several ways of applying grand totals to the analysis. I always like to drag and drop, and when I drag it to the viz, I have a choice of rows, columns, or subtotals. I'm just going to drop it on and get the grand totals on the column level. Now, what's important to understand is Tableau is not adding these three values together. What it's doing is it's going to the data table that's beneath this worksheet, and it's adding the individual values that make up the category. In other words, it's looking at those 10,000 rows of data to get this one line of data here. And we have options on how we want to see the total. Automatic is going to be the same as the level of the measure in the viz itself. Or we could look at sum or average, and Tim took us through, and we looked at sum. We're taking a look at average now, and it's not really the average of these, but it's the aggregated average of those from the data table itself. Now, you've probably run into situations where when you apply grand total, you don't get any result. And it's always associated with some sort of aggregation. This is the simplest one to see and understand. This is just a lookup function, a table calculation. And all this does is take the percent difference between these two rows at each one of the regions. But mathematically, there's nothing on a grand total line that makes sense. So you don't get anything. You don't get anything at that level. So you're not always going to get a value in the grand total. Now, from time to time, we'll get a question come in. And a user will write a question and will say, hey, look, I want to look across segments, but I want my total to be the sum by region. And at the same time, in the same table, I want to look down that table and I want to know what the average was in that segment. Now, using grand totals, there's a way to do this. We're going to take advantage of a property using a table calculation called size. And size just tells us how large a partition is. And in this table, size equals 1 is the only place, or grand totals and subtotals are the only place where size equals 1. So I can write a formula that says, hey, look, if size equals 1 in this column right here, I'm going to go across the table. If that equals 1, then give me the sum of sales. But everywhere else in here, I want to use this calculation, this LOD, which in words would say, hey, take the combinations of region and segment and sum sales at those levels. And there's 4 regions and 3 segments. For those 12 values, sum the sales. And I want to use an aggregation of average. If I put sum, this value is going to be the same, but I want to use average so that we're calculating the average going down and the sum going across when we total automatically. And that's how we can do both the totals across the rows and the average down the columns. Well, that gets us to table calculations. Table calculations, and Tim went through quite a few table calculations, but table calculations are last in the order of operation. And because they're last in the order of operation, they can use any calculation that preceded them. And you can take like LODs and use them in table calculations. But the reverse is not true. You can't use a table calculation in an LOD, for example. Now, they always operate, they always end up being an aggregate. I mean, if you think about the data table that underlies the visual that you're seeing, you're aggregating those values up to the level that you see. So the table calculation is always going to return an aggregate value. When we think about table calculations, I want you to think about an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet or whatever spreadsheet you're using. We talk about scope and direction. And scope is the amount or the portion of the data table that the calculation is applying to, and direction is either across or down. Using a table calculation is very easy. I'm going to use the same one that Tim showed earlier. We can use a quick table calculation. You have a choice of a lot of different calculations. We're going to use percent of total. And you can see that right away, we calculate the percent of total going across the data field. That's the default. So the direction was across. Well, that's not what we wanted. We can open up the caret and compute using, and instead of going across the table, we can go down the table. So we've changed direction down, and now we've got our data, and now we're calculating the percentage that we wanted to see. We talked a bit about nested calculations and how you can nest an LOD expression inside a table calc. We'll get questions from time to time where someone will say, hey, I want to rank my subcategories by segment, and I want to see how that varies by year. Well, the first step in that process is going to be to determine the values that we want to rank. And this is that LOD expression again. This is determined up in step 4. It's a fixed calculation, step 4 in the order of operation. And the way you'd read this is you'd say, hey, take all the combinations of segment, subcategory, and year of order date. So I got 4 of these, and I got 17 of those, and I got 3 of that. There's 204 of those. And at each one of those 204 points, sum the sales. And that's what you see in this chart here. And I should say, the LOD says, save those for later. I've created a virtual layer in my data set. Save those for later so I can use those values later. Well, later comes around in the order of operation sense. And down here in step 10 of the order of operations, I want to use those LODs. I've got to aggregate them. And yes, you can aggregate an LOD. And an LOD is not an aggregate in itself, even though it represents a higher level in your data structure. We say, take the sum of those values that are calculated and rank them descending. And we do that. And when we do that and apply them to the table, we get values that sure enough are running across the table. Now I'm going to show you how to do this. There's several different ways that we can change the scope and direction of this table, but I wanted to show you the calculation editor here. we've got it set so that we can show the assistant here. And this highlight will show you both the scope and direction. This table across, we're going across the table. Well, when we look at this, we know, well, this isn't right. I wanted my ranking at the subcategory level, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add the subcategory into the calculation. Well, all of a sudden the entire table is highlighted, and you can see the values go from 1 to 240. That's not what we wanted. The scope became the entire table. We didn't want the scope to be the entire table. We wanted to look down these individual columns. Well, there's a couple ways of doing that, but the way I want to show you here is we can restart that calculation at the segment level. Every time the segment changes, we want to restart that calculation. So by restarting at the segment level, we're going to get the ranking that we wanted, and we can see how phones might have been first in consumer and corporate and third in home office in 17. But by the time we got to 2020, they were first in home office also. Now I wanted to take a look at some lookup functions, and I think I've still got time here. I want to talk about lookup functions and how you can use table calculations to navigate the table and return different values from different cells within the table. And there's 5 calculations that you can use. There's first and last. First is the first cell in a row or column. Last is the last cell in a row or column. Index counts across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, across the table, down and down the rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Previous value is going to return the immediately preceding value, and lookup allows you to go to another cell and return that value to your work. And I'm going to look at a simple data set here. And that simple data set, I took a look at sales by subcategory. Now, we looked at some of this with Tim. And once again, I'm an engineer, so I have to put things in words here. So the way I would read this in words, I would say, well, for this column, for this new measure I'm creating, go to the column that's called sales, and it's got to be the sum of sales because that's what I've got in my biz. Go to the column called sum of sales and look back up one value. Down is positive, up is negative, and that's going to return this value. So I get the preceding value, if you will. We could also have looked at in this column over here, we could have done a lookup in the column sales and return the first value. So every entry is the same. It's the first value in that. And then you can do some math, and we can look up at the current row minus the first value, and you get a column that looks like this. And you can even do math in here. Like I could take a look at first plus 1, and I'm no longer using this value, the first value, but I'm using this value, the first plus 1 value. Now there's one more thing that we can do with table calculations. Very often we'll have someone, they'll say, hey, look, I have created a calculation that provides a running total, and that running total is going to start at the beginning of my data here in 2020, but I only want to look at the last 12 values or the last 10 values. Well, we can use what's known as a table calculation filter or a table filter or a show hide filter. That's what I like to use. If I just put a filter on here, what's going to happen is that the data will filter, but the calculation will restart where I applied the dimension filter. Now this calculation just says, hey, look, if you're one of the last 12 values, then show, else hide. You can do this more simply by just looking at the last 12 values. I like to write it out so that 6 months from now, when I look back and I'm trying to think, what was I doing? I realized, yeah, I wanted to just show certain types of data. So if I just look at show, I'm going to get the last 12 values on that data set. And we'll just put that up there so you can see the values going from 0 to 11. Once again, as Tim says, hey, this is computer counting, so 0 to 11 is 12 values. And I just see the last 12 values. Okay, that's what I wanted to cover with you today. I hope you have a better understanding of what the order of operation does, how you use it to create each one of your worksheets, and how the sequence that it goes through, well, not limits, but it controls the answers that you get out of calculations and what you see in your data set. The data that you saw today, this data set that you saw today, is already out on my Tableau public site. You can go to my Tableau public site and download it. It's listed under 0 to Zen. It's the second session. 0 to Zen is a 5-part series that I put together, and it's really my story. It's, hey, I started at 0. All I knew was Excel and a little bit of Access, and I had to learn how to use Tableau. And there were 5 things I really had to learn and understand before I was comfortable using Tableau. This Thursday, we're going to do step 4, and step 4 is LOD expressions and table calculations in more detail. The first 3 steps, the workbooks for those are out on my Tableau public site. My blog is also out there. There's my LinkedIn address and my Twitter handle. If there are questions at this time, I'm available for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you very much, Jim. It was very enlightening, as always, and I encourage our audience to register to 0 to Zen because they are a very great session. For the moment, we have 2 questions for you. One, I think that you already answered, but I will ask you anyway. It's this slide deck that you have shown. Is it on your Tableau public profile?
The slide deck for this and all of the 0 to Zen calculations are out on Tableau. They're out on the Tableau public site. The session I'm doing Thursday will be out there on Friday. Okay. We are recording all those sessions. They'll be available as recordings at some point in time after the dust settles and I can clean them up a little bit. Okay.
That's great. We have another question from Maike. You got lucky. You don't have so many questions to answer. It was so clear that I'm just kidding, Tim. Tim's session was very, very clear, but yeah, it's a topic that brings much more maybe question. We have one question for you from Maike. If you want to filter the view on a dimension, is it best to use a measure filter or to add the dimension to filter and use a formula? Yeah, you have it on the Q&A question at 7:27 p.m. So our question is, should she ask like to display the data where a measure it's up higher than 25? Or better to use a dimension? The question is measure higher than 25, or she should use a formula with sum of measure higher than 25?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the question. Let me focus on what you're saying, and I'm going to try to.
So a question is, should she use, and I think that both are relevant but don't display the same thing, a measure, use a filter and display data that were higher than 25, or sum of measure higher than 25?
Okay. Now I understand the question. Let's think about the 2 different levels that we're looking at. The one level is just, think of that top box again, where it's at all values. That is going to filter the data at the data table level. Tim referred to it as at the row level in the data table. So if you say, I want only values greater than 25, it's going to go to that data table that's underneath the viz, not what you're looking at, but the data table that's underneath the viz, and it's only going to have values greater than 25. On the other hand, if I look at values greater than 25, I look at the sum greater than 25, going down that window and selecting that I want to do an aggregate level, it's going to look at the visual that you've got on the screen in front of you. Okay, and only values on that visual that are already totaled that are greater than 25 will show up in the viz. Does that resonate? Does that answer the question?
Yes, at least to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I will. Do we have another one? Yeah, you can have fun and try to see if you can answer some of the other question that we have. In the meantime, I will just go forward and share my screen for the finish of the question of the session. So some little announcements. We have a Tableau Live coming soon. You can register. You have for Europe in May 6th, for APAC May 11th, and for Americas in May 18. So many numbers to pronounce with my French accents, so difficult. I put already the link to in the chat. If you would like to register, you can do so. Okay. And now our logo contents winner. So last month we announced that we will launch a little contents with 100. Yes, I got very excited. $100 prize for the winner, and we ask the participant to design a logo in Tableau. So we got a lot of submission. And we are very happy. We have we got some dozen submissions, so we are very happy. And we pre-select the top 3. So the top 3 are Cesar Munoz, Nile Sapio, and Heidi Kalbe. And the winner is this beautiful logo. So thank you, Cesar Munoz. We will send you soon an email with all the details to win the prize. And from today, we will start using the logo in our slide deck and all our email.
Annabelle, I think you
Yes.
can't see your screen with the logo.
Oh, damn. Oh. What I am sharing.
You're not sharing.
Nothing. You see, I knew that I will mess up somewhere.
Drums are still rolling, as they're saying.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. At least someone tell me. So, I knew. So, let's go back. So, can you see my screen now?
We can, yeah.
So, please, first the nomination. So, to show people that we got some nomination. And for the moment, we select off of all these dozen logos that we got, we select these top 3. So that are starting from the left, Cesar Munoz, Heidi Kalbe, and Nile Sapio. So we thank everyone who participated. They were very awesome logos, and it was difficult to choose, and we have to fight between each other. And now the win is, I already announced it, but now you can see the logo. So that is Cesar Munoz, and you will be able to, we will send her an email and with all the details so you can win the prize, and we will use this beautiful logo everywhere. So the next Tableau user group analytic is already in, so people can already register. If you don't want, so now I have a new marketing strategy that if you don't want me to harass you by sending you a lot of email, you can register today. So thank you very much for everyone who joined. I will stop the recording. I will keep a little longer here to answer some Q&A question. And I wish you a beautiful evening, afternoon, or night. Bye-bye.